Welcome back to the Kingsway Podcast.
Welcome.
Did you clap?
I did.
Okay, good.
I already did.
Wanted to make sure you clapped.
We're letting go of our trade secrets here, where we record audio on one device and video on another device, and we clap before we start the podcast, so we can line it up with a big audio spike. Yeah, that's when we take the blue pill or the red one. I don't know.
Go down the rabbit hole. Yeah.
I'm glad you guys can hear this podcast. Everyone can. I'm glad that some of you are watching this podcast. I'm glad that none of you can smell this podcast.
Yeah.
That is
I
not
just told
Ryan
I have a pair of shoes that need to be let go of. They're like
incinerated.
The Velveteen Rabbit at this point. They've been through a lot, and they need to be said thank you and then let go of. Like
that reminds me. I can't remember if it's The Office or Brooklyn Nine-Nine. There's like some wedding that the whole group is at, and both of them have the big fat stupid character. Mm-hmm. So Brian from The Office, but then Scully from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Mm-hmm. I don't remember which one it was, but I think it was The Office. He puts his shoes outside his hotel room. And he's like, I put them out there to get cleaned. And they're like, sir, we incinerated those. they were not fit for this world.
Not fit for this world. There was no hope.
I think it's The Office because they wears Kleenex boxes on his feet.
What's funny, I sent a text to Katrina and I said, hey, I think I need to get rid of these shoes. And she goes, finally, I'll make them disappear. I was like, all right, well, I'm not the only one. And it's funny, I don't know if you're this way. I have 3 pairs of shoes at all times that I rotate. It's one that I wear outside. It's one that I wear day to day, and it's one that I wear if I need to look nice.
Yep.
And then they just rotate down.
Which ones are the gym ones?
The gym ones are every day to day. Mainly because for me, I don't really sweat at my feet. The bigger thing is if I wear them to play disc golf. If I wear them to play disc golf, they're at the bottom because disc golf is just like you're going to be out in the nastiness, and it's just not going to be. And you wear them out really fast. Luckily, I had Seth give me a really nice pair of hiking shoes that I've been using to play disc golf in, and they have been amazing. Just like a game changer. But now it's like going up to first class. I don't know if I can go back to econ now. Yeah, and I'm spoiled.
My shoe regiment is if it's the summer, I'm wearing Chacos.
You're wearing Chacos.
I put away socks for other than Sunday mornings 6 months of the year.
That's wild. I have hobbit feet, so if I did that. People would think I'm a troll or a small furry creature.
Yeah, then we'd start to think that. So sorry.
My true nature would be revealed. Good transition.
Yes. My true
taking
nature.
a little bit of break from the Sunday seminar, Sunday study hall. And we're going to just jump into a topic that I feel like I had a resource that came across my YouTube page, and then it's just kind of led to some discussions, and it's also kind of timely as Father's Day was just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I'm raising 3 boys, and so this is a constant
I am a boy
evaluation. So for me, that's kind of why I came in and I was like, hey, I think I want to do a discussion around this, and it's basically on the conversation of like, how do we know how to be a man? Like, how do we be? What does it look like to be a man?
What's so tough is we're not the first people to talk about this.
No.
We are. Everybody's bringing in baggage about what it means to be a man, and some people are bringing in. Honestly, probably most people are bringing in some bad baggage.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about is exactly what you're saying, but it's a way to understand what you've been handed, and the way that this resource described it is you're handed a script. Of what you think it means to be a dad or a father or a husband or a man. And that script can be written by the culture. That script can be written by your environment you grew up. That script can be written by the movies or the people that are closest to you and work. It could be even described to you by your friends. And that script is something that we sometimes understandably have read and like looked at and know exactly, but a lot of times it's subconscious.
It's
like,
assumed.
It's assumed. Yeah. It's assumed behind the scenes. It's kind of been like written into our lives as like, this is what it looks like. This is what it sounds like. This is what it feels like. And what's funny is though, as you grow up, either you have holes in the script that you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this situation, or you have things that contradict what you think should be that. And so then you bump up against it. And then you start to ask, okay, what is outside of my understanding that maybe is the healthier that I don't have the script for? And if you're a Christian, then you start asking, what is God's script. What does he want out of a man?
I actually talked about this at the beginning of our Father's Day Sunday worship gathering. I gave a call to worship where I talked about how growing up, I thought all dads had their polos tucked into their blue jeans with their woven belt holding it up. And then like career day in elementary school was like, wait, there's so many different kinds of dads.
Yeah.
They don't all have the same comb over and the same whatever.
Yep.
And just like being exposed to that, and then got into a call to worship that talks about what theologians, I'm sure there are other thinky groups that think about these things, but they use cataphatic and apophatic speech to talk about qualities of the character of God. And apophatic are, comparison of human qualities to God's characteristics.
Yeah.
And so looking at bad man characteristics and saying apophatically, God is nothing like that.
Yep.
He is as far removed from that as the East is from the West.
He will never abandon you. He will never. Yeah.
But then the characteristics of good men and trying to compare those characteristics to God use cataphatic speech. Those are in the same general bucket as the thing that God is.
Yep.
But the way that God is that characteristic, that quality, is so far beyond.
That is the tip of the iceberg.
East is from the West.
That's the tip of the iceberg. God is so much more than.
Yeah. They are 1 mile down that trail, and he is 3 countries down that trail.
Yeah. So I don't want to chase you away from this podcast or make you, but I would tell you this right now. If you want to watch a 2-week series on this, North Point Community Church, where Andy Stanley preaches, he started it on Father's Day and just finished it this last week. It's just 2 sermons on godly men. What does it look like? And what's the script? And we're going to mention a large portion of the end of the sermon series. So even if you're like, I want to go and get the full story or whatever, maybe we'll whet your appetite and you'll go back and listen to it. But I want to use this as a launching pad for a discussion, because there are so many scripts that we could walk through and the discussion could go anywhere. But I don't want you to have to listen for too long before you get something that maybe would be helpful if you're a man listening to this. And that's not a man that's married, not a man that's maybe got everything figured out. You could be in high school and listening to this. You could have been married and have grandkids and be listening to this and still trying to figure this out. I don't think this is a one and done, like all you need is this one podcast and now you have it figured out.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a growth process. I think as your relationships with your parents, with your friends, with your spouses, your coworkers, your age, the younger generations, the older generations, all of those things are interactions with men in different places and different times, and you yourself need that script to change as you go through all that stuff. And so here's kind of my the reason for dragging Ryan into this podcast, and then also having him be here as a sounding box to whether or not this is healthy discussions with healthy roots that lead to positive script changes. I have a list here of things that Andy Stanley lays out at the very end of his sermon series, and it's actually a pretty lengthy list.
He says something along the lines of, we've received a script about manhood from our culture, from whatever, so let's try to change the script to a Jesus script.
Yep.
And these are script items from the Jesus script, from the Gospels.
Absolutely. And what's so cool is he uses, and I didn't even show this part to you, but he uses John 1 as the reason that we can trust this. The word logos is in there.
Yeah.
And what logos meant in the Greek culture was the idea of this truth behind everything. Like we know this ethical, moral reality exists. And what that was the person of Jesus from the beginning of time. He was the logos. He was the perfect description of that thing that at times seems beyond what we can see. And that word logos is translated to the word.
The word logos means word.
But it's more than that in the Greek culture. It's almost Greek theology and Greek...
it's Greek philosophy.
I've
heard... what's the philosopher whose name starts with an A? Not Socrates, Aristotle, maybe?
Could be.
Aristotelian thought.
Yeah.
Ooh, I sound so smart right now.
You've already said catatonic or whatever.
Cataphatic, apophatic.
Yep.
Catatonic.
Yep. We are deep.
Blah, 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 blah. That's how half these words feel. But I'm pretty sure it's Aristotle. I'm pretty sure I'm not wrong. That uses, I think I don't know about founder, but he uses this kind of thought a lot where he's like, there are chairs in the world, but out there in the great beyond is the chair off of which all chairs are trying to be the chair, the perfect chair, the whatever.
Exactly.
I'm I'm trying to piece this together from my vague, foggy memory, but those might be the same thing.
And he's basically alluding to that Jesus has the script.
Yeah.
You've bumped up against it in your life. You've maybe had moments where you felt like you've got it right or you felt like you've got it wrong. And he's like, what if Jesus is holding on to, and it's been that from the beginning. And so he's like, if that's true, then we need to look to Jesus for what the script is for a man. And then he walks through these things that he sees recorded by John and recorded in Peter's gospel and recorded about Jesus as being the description of not only God, but the God-man.
Yeah.
And so these are things that he pulls out of the Gospels as descriptors of what the script for men should be.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of the script for men that some of us have inherited, and honestly, even there's been a big cultural argument about manhood and what it means to be a man. Not just masculinity, not just male like sex, gender, whatever, but like what it means to be a man. And I've heard... I was going somewhere really clear with this, and it's in the middle of my brain, but not on the outside, so where I can see it.
Well, I know if I can get you there. I know for me, the masculine side of things is passiveness has now been felt like people are saying,
Yeah, so it's some of the most masculine, most pro-man, men-defining things, even Christian ones, have had a hard time with Jesus for being too passive. And we'll even say things like meekness is weakness. And
well, and what's funny is Andy Stanley alludes to that in the very first sermon where he talks about how when Jesus is described in the Gospels, how most women love him, but most men don't want to be like him. They're like, I don't want to be like that. And so they end up coming and learning and saying you're supposed to be like Jesus. And half the people in the room, all the women are like, yes. And all the men are like, no, I don't want to be like that. And so redefining the script is actually recognizing the masculine strength at the center of Jesus, and that the passiveness is not passiveness by just weakness or running away or fear. It's actually a choice of control and
self-control. That's what meekness really means. Meekness is not weakness. That's literally untrue. Meekness is power under control.
And overarching my best definition I've ever had about masculinity going into these things was its strength leveraged for others, or my strength leveraged for other people. So let me just walk through a few of these. I think this will be healthy. Again, if you want to go watch this, it's the second week. We'll link it. It's at the very end. I highly encourage you to watch both messages because I think the first one pulls you in, and then the second one is like, you can't get out of that second one without at least having one thing to probably go, I need to think about that. And maybe one of these will be that as you're listening. I don't know if we'll be able to put these in the actual, maybe. Okay. But if anything else, go and listen to that. It's like the last 10 minutes. So here's the first, I'm just going to read a few and then we'll pause. I'll read the first 5. A masculine script of a man from the Gospels described in the New Testament is a man who forgives regardless without being asked. Is a man who refuses to return evil for evil, but looks for the opportunity to return good for evil. A man who does not lust commoditizes a woman. A man knows that lust commoditizes a woman. A godly man leaves revenge in God's capable hands. A godly man publicly celebrates the success of other men. I'm going to pause there. Any of those
already heavy.
I know. Any of those stick out as like one that like particularly hit?
3 and 4.
Yeah.
All of them, but 3 and 4 really hit. And I don't want to do this to you. I feel like we should read 16 or 17 or whichever the one with the 2 qualities is at the end, because it really helps define how this script from Jesus on how to be a man, like what it's all running,
trickling
from
and running to. I agree. What the goal is.
So Andy Stanley gives the whole sermon dominant thought thing where it's like, if you didn't hear anything else today, hear this, and that's usually the cue that's like, this is the most important thought on which all the others
don't forget this next thing. Yes.
So that one, if you flip your paper over, is
right here.
Yeah. I can't read it. So
well, and here's the thing: a man who is willing to try to A man who's willing to bring the fight to his two primary enemies, his appetites and his insecurities.
Yeah. Bring the fight every day.
Every day. Bring the fight every day to his two primary enemies, his appetites and his insecurities. That is the overarching thing over all things that man struggles with. And I do think if I was to boil down the sermon in a moment and I was trying to write a script for myself if I have 19, it would just be, this is where your fight's going to be. And you'll never not be fighting in this area. It'll be food, it'll be sex, it'll be power.
It'll be money.
It'll be money. I mean, it will be influence. All of that stuff. And then your insecurities will come out of what you feel like is not being met in your appetites or what is not portrayed as, pride, arrogance, envy. All those things will be insecurities in you if you're not careful.
So really, a lot of this strength that we're talking about for what it means to be a man isn't necessarily physical strength, although it certainly can be.
It can be.
But it is character, willpower strength. Honestly, one of the hardest strengths to have and to maintain. So you could fit this criteria and be in a wheelchair or have cerebral palsy. You could fit this criteria and be at the bottom of your family power structure, of your corporate success ladder, of your friend group, of your whatever, in all these spaces that any man could find himself in.
And I'm going to keep reading these because I think it'll start to help kind of see where these at. A godly man equates greatness with elevating others over himself. A godly man stands at the funeral of a friend and weeps openly. A godly man who stops to help someone who can't return the favor. A godly man continually, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I can't read that one. My chicken scratch is too bad. A godly man knows when to turn the tables and when to turn the other cheek and knows the difference between the two and who the two needs to happen to.
What I'm noticing on top of all this is that a lot of these are all snapshots from Jesus' story in the Gospels. So turning tables, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, hopefully, but is from after he's ridden into Jerusalem in the last week of his life. And one of the first things he does when he's inside, celebrated by everyone, is go to the place where people worship and make room for the Gentiles.
Make room.
It's not clearly stated in there that is his purpose, but what he is doing, he goes in there, he flips over tables without hurting a single person.
Nope.
He flips over tables and the institutionalized place where people change money in the temple. And those were all set up in the court of the Gentiles.
Yep.
And he says, my Father's house is a house of prayer. And so you can easily piece together, he's wanting to make sure that outer court for the Gentiles, for the non-insiders, is still a place of prayer and not overlooked and whatever. So like that, along with even him crying at the funeral of a friend, they're all service-minded.
Yep.
They're all custodial. You have been put in my custody or my charge. I'm supposed to be taking care of you.
Yep.
That's like the crux of all this stuff. I'm going to control and rein in my appetites and my insecurities so that I can take care of y'all.
Yep. And I think even as we go through these, like a man will challenge the rights will defend the rights of others over his own, who will speak the truth regardless of the consequences. A lot of these, who is not overly troubled by trouble. I think those types of just amazing opportunities, who does not seek to control, but seeks controlling himself, not controlling others, but seeks self-control over controlling others. This starts to really be just an everyday, sees success as following the will of the Father in heaven. It's pretty wild as you walk through these. A man who ends every day with a clear conscience between him and God.
Yeah.
A godly man is a man who ends every day with a clear conscience between him and God. And again, if you boil all this down, what it really starts to help you recognize is that a man in the kingdom, a man of the kingdom like script, models Jesus, where he leverages everything he has for others around him. So even when the turning of the tables, that isn't about him gaining something in that. It's about him defending the rights of these people that were being overlooked. And then turning the other cheek is when the opportunity is the only cost is to him. He places revenge back in the hands of the Father.
Yeah.
And so some of these intertwine. I love goes to a friend of a funeral and openly weeps. That is something that I know was suppressed in my family because that, boys don't cry. And you need to be tough for everybody around you because the girls are going to cry. So you need to be tough and not cry so that they feel loved and supported. You know what I mean? And men who can't control their emotions they're not men. But then we have John 11 where Jesus goes to Lazarus' grave, and even though he knows he's about to come out, and even though he knows the ending's great, he still openly weeps.
Yeah. I would venture to say that not crying ever is also not controlling your emotions. My emotions are too uncontrollable, so I have to quench them and never have emotions. Versus Jesus saying, this is a good time to have emotions. Maybe not that clearly. But like, this is an expression of my actual love for my friend.
Yeah, and it's also joining in with the people around you in their grief and not making them feel bad because they're sad. You're joining in. It's like when a toddler cries over nothing and the mom comes in and goes like, "Get over it. It's just a splinter in your toe. Like that's not that big a deal." Rather than coming in and picking the child up and being like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That looks painful. That'll hurt. Oh, I'm so sorry." And we know that that's what a mom would do and should do. But for whatever reason, we think dads are supposed to tell them to just toughen up and get over it. I do think there's a part of dads that challenge their kids, that help their kids do hard things. But I do think there's a compassionate side of being a dad in that way that sometimes is overlooked. I love the man who refuses to return evil for evil, but looks for the opportunity to do good for evil.
Yeah.
Like that alone, looking for the chance to return good for evil, that is a learned script. That is not naturally in you to learn to do that. Forgives regardless without being asked. I can tell you if there is one thing that people come up to me all the time and they ask, do I have to forgive? And then they tell me a story. They tell me a situation. They talk about something hard.
And they're all painful.
And they're very real hard things to forgive. And I tell them every time, it is not about them. It's about the bitterness that stays in your life if you refuse to do this. And look, I'm not saying it'll take one prayer or one moment. It may take a process of handing bits and pieces off.
It may take 1,000 speakings of I forgive them.
And I tell them every time, I'm like, admit to God you're having a hard time forgiving, not refusing to forgive. Admit to him that you're having a hard time to forgive, but don't admit that you're not. Like, I'm not forgiving. No. Just say, I'm having a hard time forgiving.
In fact, most of this list is really difficult. It's maybe easy to have one of these sorted down, and then struggle with the other 17. But there's a book that I really love called The Worship Pastor by Zach Hicks, and he has the same sort of thing for worship pastors. It's like 16, 17 small chapters on like you have this role and this role and this role and this role and you're just like barraged with all these things you should be weighing and all these things you should try to be good at. And then the epilogue, the concluding chapter is the worship pastor as failure. You cannot do all these things. I cannot do all these things. These are good metrics to be aware of and to ask the Holy Spirit for help in. And that is exactly what Andy is saying as he tries to assemble kind of a different group of the fruit of the Spirit from
absolutely
the gospel examples.
He takes the flesh stories of Jesus and he flushes them out.
At the end of his list, he specifically says, like, I cannot do these things.
Nope.
I run out of patience and grace and all these other things. Pretty sure he lists like half the fruit of the Spirit. I run out of these things.
Yep.
That's when I need to go to God and say, hey, I'm not enough to do these things the way Jesus did. I need you. I need the Holy Spirit to refresh me and give me fresh peace and give me deeper wells of grace and forbearance. You love that word.
Forbearance, I do.
And all those sorts of things. So honestly, this list is very much like, was it Galatians 4, Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit?
5.
The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control, forbearance. I skipped over one and maybe I'm missing some others.
No, forbearance, you got it.
But this list is not the list of qualities of a good person or the list of qualities of a person who God would be happy to start partnering with. This is the list of what happens when God empowers a person's actions and decision-making and will. And so this list from Andy is no different from pictures from the Gospels. Well, you cannot always...
Yeah.
There's one in here, I don't know if you read it, but I remember hearing him say it. A godly man is not owned by his possessions, but shares them freely or whatever. Something like that. Mm-hmm. That is such a Christian sin. Yep. That is such a it's where like lust or some other things, if they're found out, it's like, ooh, that's bad. Got to talk to the church elders, got to whatever. But if a man in the church has a Corvette convertible that he doesn't let anybody drive, they're like, yeah, that's just kind of one of those things that's unique about him. Mm-hmm. No,
no, that's not okay.
And I'm not trying to get to some communist Corvette sharing church club.
I think it's really funny. Like this become a metric, like where you identify with a couple of these, like where you're like, no, I might be actually succeeding. And then there's just a couple that you're like, I don't know if I'll ever figure that out. Like that is just going to be hard for me ever to like let go of revenge and put it in God's capable hands. There have just been things in my life that I have watched and seen that I'm like, no, if they were here and I had a chance, you know what I mean? Like I'm not.
And I think there's so much more to say about that. In fact, we've probably already talked about it a little bit on our Pacifism Nonviolence podcast.
And it's hard. And that's it's just the heart thing though. Yeah, right? It's the heart thing.
We're all made in God's image. And sometimes we have this anger at injustice. And it's good anger at injustice. It's actually godly to say, it's not right that person was treated that way. It's not that this wrong. It's not right that this wrong thing happened. But revenge is a thing that none of us should be trusted with. Yep. We can't carry out vengeance or revenge in any holy, godly, perfect way. Only God can do that. And so even the earliest Christians who almost exclusively were pacifists and nonviolent and anti-war and whatever, they still had seething anger sometimes at injustice. Yep. But you see in Revelation 5, a lot of them who have been beheaded for the faith. So they're just walking around heaven a foot shorter than they used to be. And they ask God, how soon will you avenge us? And he's not like, you should have done that yourself, you weak, whatever. But he also doesn't say, it's bad for you to want that. He says, not until more of you join me. But it's a thing you can only trust God with.
Well, and that's one of my, not to like bring movies into this, but sometimes you just have to. The latest Batman movie.
Amen.
It's probably one of my favorites descriptions of this. Yeah. Because Batman is famous for not killing. He doesn't kill. That's not his thing. If at all possible, he brings people to justice.
In the ICU.
But here's the thing about this movie, and maybe I'm ruining it, so if you haven't watched it, you can pause here and skip forward a little bit. But at the very beginning of the movie, he gets in a fight, and they ask him who he is, and he says, what?
I am vengeance.
I am vengeance. And then at the very end of the movie, one of the bad guys that is doing a horrible act, a public shooting, is asked, who are you? And he says, I am vengeance. And then Batman has a monologue where he says, I realize I've had an effect and it was the wrong one. Yeah. And he falls into the water, and instead of thinking about all the bad guys, he sees all the people of Gotham for the first time. And he lights a flare and he leads them out of this broken building. And it symbolizes he's not going to seek vengeance anymore. He's going to leave that to the bad guys. He is seeking justice now, and his mind is going to change. He's not there to pay back evil with evil. He's going to try to be a good vigilante. And it's such a cool, like, kind of growth of the character and really well laid out. And I just thinking as you were talking about that, I watched that 2 nights ago.
That's such a good movie.
Such a good movie. And the scene when he falls in the water and lights, I'm just like, oh, it's like this captivating visual of like the light bulb going off in his head where he's like, I've messed up. This is my fault. Partly part of the blame. I've been trying so hard to be God.
So many superhero movies have that like storyline under them now, where it's like, did we, by being so powerful, like
do more harm than good?
All of this harm in to whatever. Anyway, that's a superhero thing.
So the one I want to end, because I think this one is the one that I think spoke to me the most, is controlling myself rather than trying to control the people around me.
Yes.
Controlling myself rather than trying to control the people around me. The mentality right now is that the world is broken. There's so many things that don't work. There's so many reasons that we can, cry the sky is falling, and we can play victim. And meanwhile, there's so many things in our lives that are out of control, that are completely up to us.
Yeah.
And I think as men, if we would stop looking at the things around us as things we're trying to control, and instead that we can't, and instead look at the things in our life that we can, I think we'd feel less defeated. I think we'd feel more empowered. I think we'd be more positioned and ready for the things that possibly come into our frame of influence, our sphere of influence. And I feel like it actually gives purpose to a day, rather than feeling like it's just out of control. I can't do anything to change it.
And I think this is a big Christian theme, that like the Jews, God's chosen people before Jesus showed up, and even during Jesus showed up, which this Judaism and Israel expanded to become the whole world, and we're all invited into this saving thing in Christianity. But this whole system had every 7 days, you did what God did, and you rested on the seventh day.
Yep.
And you enjoy the fruits of your labors and you whatever. But even if you're a farmer, your crops are still out there.
Yeah.
And you have to look out your window on that day and not do any work and watch the world keep spinning without you spinning it.
Yep.
And it's so valuable to see, especially as Christians now, that we are members of the body of Christ. Jesus can fix the world, and we get to be like a pinky or something. Yeah. We get to be 1 inch of one blood vessel. We're doing our little part, but it's not our job to save the world.
No.
We've been gratefully invited into the process of Jesus.
And I think that
the world.
as men, we need to remind ourselves that we just plant the seeds, but God brings the rain. Like we can till the soil, but that doesn't make the soil get the vitamin D that it needs from the sun. Like the way that this whole works is it's together. Mm-hmm. And I think part of it is recognizing that this isn't all by accident, but it's not all just random. You know what I mean? Yeah. So there's something about this that I feel is empowering to myself. It's something that I recognize that I can't fixate on all the things that I can't control, but I can hyper-fixate on what God is calling me to change. And I can hyper-control what I can hyper-control, and I can let go of what I can't.
Yeah. And what you can control, to get back to the main thing, is your appetites and your insecurities. Maybe not control, but what you can
what you have influence in. What you have influence
in.
Yep, what you can fight. And this is how we end the podcast, with these appetites and insecurities. The idea around appetites is an appetite is something that you desire in your life that will never fully be satisfied. So this is the concept of hunger, right? You are hungry and you need food and you eat and it's appeased, right? Your appetite is appeased, but it's not fully satisfied. And that is in every area of your life, whether it's greed, lust, food, water, power. All these things, power, what we talked about earlier. All of those things. I love to play this game, and you and I have talked about this before. Whatever your strongest appetite is, what if you gave into it for a day? How long are you satisfied? Yeah. Like, how long are you satisfied? Go hedonistic as you want. Go greedy as you want, right? Go lazy as you want. How long before you're like, this isn't as fun as I thought?
Usually measured in hours.
Hours.
Not minutes, but hours.
I mean, the thing about this, like, eating is the safest one to talk about because nobody feels awkward about it, because it's more accepted. But,
everybody's got to
go to a buffet and you give in to every desire on that buffet. Every piece of pizza, every piece of steak,
ice cream,
that soft serve machine with every topping, and you'd keep every crab rangoon that you've ever dreamed about eating with that sour and sweet sauce and sweet sour sauce, and you just do it. And then, how do you feel in the moment? In the moment, amazing, right? Let's just not knock it. If you're sinning and it doesn't feel good, you're doing it wrong, right? But if you're after sin, I think that's where everybody's like, ooh, how do you feel in an hour? Most of the time, drowsy, sick,
nauseous,
unmotivated, a little bit of like regret starts to sink in. And then how do you feel in 3 to 4 hours? You might feel a little hungry again. You might be like thinking, oh my gosh, I need to eat again. Like it just starts the cycle. And what Andy is doing and what I love is that he's defining the fight. And I think what the struggle is, so I've expressed and I've felt in my manhood journey is I don't always know who I'm fighting. And so I feel like I'm swinging at whatever's closest and whatever's, whatever, rather than being strategic, rather than recognizing where I need to point my energy, where I need to actually be focused. What's my next battle? And that's the insecurity part. If you don't feel like God is with you, if you don't feel like you have what it takes, if you're not sure if you can do it, that's where you cry out to God and his people. And you're like, I need help. I am strong in this area, but weak in this area. I need to have someone come alongside me. Yeah. And that's the end of the sermon, as he said, and like you brilliantly pointed out, like this is a list that's impossible to win all the time. The reason it's called a fight is because it's not victory.
It's just constant struggle.
Constant struggle.
I want to have an appendix on the end of this episode for married people or people in families, whatever. But honestly, this applies to everybody. We've talked about manhood and masculinity and all this. This kind of applies to everybody. This is just wise living with power, with strength of some sort. And everybody has some sort of power or strength to some degree, to some level, in different ways, whatever. But if you're in a family, Paul has this really good section in Ephesians 5 where he talks about the family code. Now, in my Bible, in the NIV, it says wives and husbands, and then later it says children and parents, and then it says slaves and masters. But in like New Testament times, this is Greco-Roman household code. All of these people are in one house.
One roof.
And they would usually exclude slaves. They're not a part of the family. So what Paul's doing here, a couple cool things, is he talks about wives and husbands. Wives for like 3 verses, but they're very short sentences. Husbands for like a long time, like 8 verses. And then children and parents, and then it goes to slaves and masters and includes slaves in the family. So he's heavy on the emphasis on husbands and like what's required of you when just walking into a Greco-Roman household, you'd be like, I'm in charge. I'm off scot-free. I just like, don't be too cruel.
I brought the money
Don't be too domineering. I'm the breadwinner, so you do all the chores. Anyway, but a lot of my Bible splits up verse 21 and 22. And so you get 22 as the beginning of the wives and husbands section. And 22 says, wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, yada, yada, yada. But the Greek New Testament manuscripts we have doesn't have verse numbers, doesn't have section headings. Honestly, doesn't have punctuation half the time. It just run-on sentences that go on forever. And so, wives, submit to your husbands. Submit isn't in the Greek. Where did they get that word from? The previous verse that the NIV cut with a section heading, which says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Doesn't have a period in the Greek, keeps moving on. So what the original thing says is, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives to your own husbands as to the Lord. What this is calling husbands and wives to do, and if you're a man, this is what you're called to do, is to submit to each other. You can't demand that, but you can model it. She can't demand it, but she can model it. It's asked of both of you, but like it's your choice to give it. So submit to each other out of reverence for Christ. And then it has a short thing about wives, submit to your husbands, not to just every man, not to your male boss at work, not to the barista at Starbucks because he has certain genitalia or whatever. But like submit to your own husband and that talks about the relationship between Christ and the church. Now the husband, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by washing with water through the word to be present. It goes on and on and on and on. Okay, what does it look like for Christ to submit to the church, which is a weird, feels wrong to even say, but what does it look like? Because he comes in as the servant leader. He comes in washing his own disciples' feet. Well, you want to see that list? Listen to Andy Stanley pull out 18 points from the Gospels, which are all snapshots of Jesus doing this thing, of him submitting, maybe too strong or too specific of a word, but like caretaking, being a good custodian. The church is in safe hands when it's in Jesus' hands. And so you, as a man, if you are married, your wife should be in safe hands if they're in your hands. Yep. You can't be in safe hands if your appetites and your insecurities are in charge, because then she's a commodity to be tossed around. Yep. She is of second importance to your own appetites, your own insecurities. But when you take the script from Jesus on what it means to be a man, she's in safe hands.
You control yourself, and you're not trying to control the people around you.
Yep.
You leverage what you have for the benefit of her.
You are not owned by your possessions, but they are for sharing. So if she tips over your motorcycle in the garage because she's trying to serve you, you don't get furious.
Nope.
Yeah.
And I always love that section as a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
It's a race to the bottom.
Exactly.
It's if I can get below my wife on the servant list and she's fighting to get, no, I get to serve you. I get to serve you. I get to serve you. You're constantly being elevated.
Here's why that's important. That's what God does with himself. God is Trinity. God is the Father and the Son and the Spirit. And it isn't, although you can see some of this occasionally a little bit in the New Testament when people talk about like what order the persons of God are in authority. When you actually hear any of those persons of God talking, they're just making a big deal about the other ones.
Yep.
This is my son in whom I am well pleased. I and the Father are one. Anybody who has seen me has seen the Father and whatever. Yep. And the Holy Spirit making a big deal about both of them. Jesus being like, I'm so stoked for the Holy Spirit to come to you guys. They're all huge fans of each other. They're all pushing each other up as they lower themselves while being pushed up by the others who are lowering themselves.
And it's a beautiful
race to the bottom.
Race to the bottom. And I think if any marriages are struggling and you're listening to this and you're hoping to get maybe a little bit of encouragement of what maybe a quality that is lacking in you or maybe a new thing to, if you would fight to keep, like the insecurities are such a killer in intimacy. If you would fight to not feel personally attacked or to feel like what is going on in your marriage is the defining thing of your success, but you would actually let Jesus declare who you are and not let pride be the thing, but you would let serving and being humble and being gentle and letting these fruits of the Spirit race you to the bottom to serve your wife and not ask her to serve you or to meet your needs or to get to the, I promise you, you will elevate your marriage so fast. Double down, triple down on sacrificial love. Yeah. It is the only way to elevate your marriage. And it's a way that demonstrates so quickly that you are not in it just for what you get, but what you can give.
You have to be really strong to do that.
It's hard.
You need to lean on the Holy Spirit. You need to grit your teeth and submit and serve and do things you wouldn't want to do. And that is the place where I see the strongest character and the strongest strength. Yep. Way stronger than I'm tired at the end of a long day. I'm going to sit in my lazy boy and you better bring me a beer. I'm going to hit you.
Yep.
That is the weakest, laziest.
And I don't understand sometimes how we forget that how we got our wives most of the time to fall in love with us was we put them on a pedestal and we loved them. Yeah. And we honored them and we thought about that. And I know that life gets hard and challenging and difficult, and it becomes more of a, well, you did this and you did that, and you feel like you deserve, and what do I get? And there is nothing on this list that says I give and I get. There's nothing on this list that says where's my reward. There's nothing on this list that says at the end of the day I get to have my own whatever. It's all about what can I give? How can I leverage what I am? How can I better benefit others by controlling? And I think controlling myself, I think there's a part of this that I hope every man that listens to this walks away going, I know what my insecurities are. I know what my appetites are. And that is the battlefield to health, not only in myself, but my family. Not only am I in myself, but my marriage. Not only myself, but my kids. Not only myself, but the environments at work or my family beyond.
When you can control your willpower, you can control anything.
The minute a man that is in control is powerful, powerful in influence, powerful in wisdom, powerful in love, is not easily shaken, can be there most of the
unoffendable.
Time. It's what they're hoping they can be for their family. But they try to go around and control the environment to feel like they're enough rather than looking inside and starting to let God mold them into the person that can be the best influence outside. Yeah. Highly encourage you to check these sermons out. We'll try to link, even if I think we've done another manly one that we can talk about at some point. I don't know. This is like 190 something or something. I don't forget what podcast.
Yeah, this is late. This is a lot.
It's a lot.
We're getting up to 200.
We are. It's wild. And I know we have a lot of new listeners, and I really appreciate that. I know Dustin's been listening. I know Brett's been listening. I know we have the old faithfuls of...
I don't know if I've said this in an episode that came out before this, but I just want to say, sorry that we missed a week. I had COVID.
Yeah, that was a rough week.
Town. I wasn't.
I didn't want to get COVID
available
again, so we didn't do one that week.
Yep.
And you were sleeping. But
I slept so long. I slept like 18 hours one day.
Well, if you've followed along for this long, we give you the gold star. You pat yourself on the back. I'm proud of you.
We lift you up and put ourselves down.
I hope that you know that learning to love and loving to learn is a huge part of why we do this podcast. We are trying to elevate our own love and stay curious about how to grow in it. And as always, you can leave a review or send it on to a friend that you think, or leave a comment. Let us know what one of these you struggled with, or the one that you thought was influential, or what this was helpful for. And you can always email us if you have any questions. Have any other thoughts?
Nope.
All right, and have a great and glorious day in the Lord. We'll see you later.
See you.